Hello? I do. Sorry, we're seconds late. Welcome. Glad you're all here. Glad I'm here, I think. It's like, thank you so much. It's like, whew. Okay, we need to just take a breath. I'm supposed to remind you that today is the last day to sign up for the Hope Choice Banquet, if you were planning to go to that, and we have a sign-up sheet on the table. And we're going to be collecting diapers and wipes for the pregnancy center this month to give to them next month, because we're going to be Samaritan of the month for March, but we're going to collect them. And my bad, I forgot the pink tub. We'll have it by tonight. I might get it after or during our break. So I think those are the only two. Oh, Night to Shine is the February 9th, and I still think they need buddy partners. So if you want to help with that, I think you sign up for that online. Other than that, I think that's all for announcements. Okay, let's pray, and then we'll get right into our lesson. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for your Holy Spirit. I pray that he'd be with me today and guide my words. I pray that he'd be with all the ladies here and open our hearts. I pray that you'd give us understanding of the huge amount of information we're going over for today. Pray that we would see Jesus in it. I thank you for this lesson. I thank you for the examples we have in all the patriarchs. I would pray that you'd put it in our hearts to follow you. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, I have to have a disclaimer first before we get into the lesson, because there's something I missed until this week. And I'd like you all to turn in your books to the end of your lesson and go to page 63, which is, it looks like the start of the next lesson. But go to page 63 in your book. Now, raise your hands so I know you're there, and then I'll tell you the next thing I have to tell you. Okay, do you see that that's a kind of a peachy colored page, orangey colored page? Those are actually the review questions for this lesson. But they're in after the first page of the next lesson. I didn't know they were there until this week. I thought, I should have known that, being the fearless leader. Oh well, anyway, so and this is, I guess, announcement to group leaders. If you're group leaders or subs, remember this. The review questions for the lesson look like they're in the next week, so you have to read ahead or flip a page ahead so you see where the review questions are, because our goal is, when you break up for small groups, spend the first 15 minutes or so on those review questions, because the amount of information, this is an overview, and this one especially is really a big overview lesson. So re-emphasizing the lesson, I think, is super important when you get to small groups instead of jumping right to prayer requests. So from now on, and I'll probably remind you more than once, do the review questions, and you don't have to do all of them, because they give the discussion questions for the video and review questions for the lesson. Pick and choose, do a couple, but start there before you go into prayer requests, okay? And then encourage your ladies to put their prayer requests on the main sheet so you don't have to, spend time getting all of them again before you start praying for them. So review questions and then prayer requests. Okay, that's all on technical stuff. Now jump back in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 12, and if you're in your book, the beginning of lesson 3, which is, let me see. See, I flipped back to the end, and now I can't find the beginning. There we go. 36 is the beginning, and to tell you the truth, I'm going to spend more time in my Bible, and you're just going to have to find where I am in your study book, because there's just a lot of stuff here. So, put your car in speed mode, because we're starting chapter 12, and we're going to clean out, go clear through the book of Genesis from here. So, pedal to the metal, seatbelts fastened, let's go. Okay, chapter 12 starts with what we call the Abrahamic covenant. It's God's call to Abraham. And he says, go forth from your country, go forth from your relatives, go forth from your father's house. And then he tells him to go to. But when I was reading the go forth, I thought, oh, this is kind of like me and Bill when we moved here from Denver. We went forth from our home country, and we went forth from our relatives, and we went forth from his father's house to a land we know not of. But here we are. So God is calling Abraham to leave his home country and go to the land which I would show you. And then once he did that, and it says, and Abraham went forth. He did what God asked him to do. But then in the middle it says what God will do for him. He says, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. And so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. But the last promise is this. And in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. See, that's a little Jesus moment in here. Because through the line of Abraham is going to come the Messiah, is going to come Jesus. So in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. So Abraham went forth. And now I've got 3 or 4 references that end up in Hebrews. And you don't have to turn here, but a lot of our people we're going to talk about today are in that line of faith in Hebrews. And in Hebrews 11:8 it says, by faith Abraham, when he was called, obeyed, going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance, and he went out, not knowing where he was going. He went by faith. When God said, go forth, he went forth, and God blessed him, and he was obedient. Excuse me. Okay, so Abram's gone forth, and let me see. Oh, he gets to the promised land. He took Sarai, his wife. They're Abram and Sarai so far. They haven't had their names changed yet. And Lot is with them, and they set out for Canaan. They were in Haran with his dad, Terah, and then Terah dies there, and they continue on to Canaan. And they get there, and the Lord appeared to him and says, to your descendants, I'm going to give this land. But then there's a famine in the land, and he goes to Egypt. God did not tell him to go to Egypt. No, wrong decision. So they lie about Sarai and find out she's his half-sister, which makes it only a half lie, but kind of an ew, so all at the same time. Then they come back to the land where they're supposed to be, and he's got his nephew Lot with them. They are both very wealthy men. They have flocks, they have sheep, they have goats, they have camels, they have donkeys. And it says in verse 6 of chapter 13, and the land could not sustain them while dwelling together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to remain forever. They were not able to remain together. So they have to branch out. So Abraham says to Lot, it's too much. We both have too much. You pick which way you'll go. Wherever you go, I'll go the other way. So Lot lifted up his eyes and saw all the valley of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere. And this was before the Lord had destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. It was like the Garden of Eden. So Lot chose for himself all the valley of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward, and they thus separated from each other. Abraham takes the highland, the settled in Canaan, while Lot settled in the cities of the valley and moved his tents as far as Sodom. Boom, boom, boom. Not going to be a good move for him. So he's got the low fertile valley. Abraham's got the high dry land. But God says, this is the land I'm going to give you. He says, for all the land that you see, I will give it to you and your descendants forever. I will make your descendants like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone can number the dust, then your descendants will be numbered. And then we're going to skip to chapter 15. See, this, we're hopping, but this is to get you the main points to see where the Jesus thread is in all of these. And the beginning of 15, it says, and after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, fear not, Abram, I am a shield to you, and your reward shall be very great. And in verse 5, he says, and he took him outside. Note my sweater right now while you read this verse. He said, now look out toward the heavens and count the stars if you are able to count them. And he said, so shall your descendants be. He says, this is what and here's another verse. Verse 6 says, and he believed in the Lord, and he reckoned it unto him as righteousness. It's not because he was a great guy yet. He believed the Lord. Remember, he came from Ur of the Chaldees to Canaan. He went out not knowing whether he went. He believed the Lord, and God counted that to him as righteousness. You don't know what all your journey is going to hold, but if you believe the Lord, then it will be accounted to you for righteousness. And I read a Devo this morning by Johnny Erickson Tata, and she said, sometimes you're just in pain, but if Jesus is in the boat, you're still going to be okay. And it's like Abraham is right there. He says, he believed the Lord, and he reckoned it to him as righteousness. Wherever I'm at in life, if Jesus is with me, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. Okay, moving right along. And then in verse 8 he says, and I'm still in chapter 15, O Lord God, how may I know that I will possess it? And this is when they do something called cutting covenant. And it's like making very solemn a covenant between two people. They're going to, and in this one, two parties to make a covenant cut animals in half to make a sacrifice, and they walk through the pieces while reciting the conditions of the covenant. I will do this, you will do that, I will do this, and never the twain, I'm going to keep my word, you're going to keep my word. It's very solemn, legally binding, like a marriage contract. This is how solemn this is. The cool thing about this one was Abraham was asleep. God put him in a deep sleep. Yes, verse 12 says, and now when the sun was going down, I'm going to back up. He said, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, 3-year-old female goat, 3-year-old ram, turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And they brought all these to him. They cut them in two, laid each half opposite the other. And the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, and Abram drove them away. But when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. And behold, terror and great darkness fell upon him. God said to Abram, know for certain that your descendants will be, and here's the cool part again, God's telling him something that's going to happen way ahead of time. He doesn't even have descendants yet, but God's telling him what's going to happen to his descendants. And God says, know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, where they will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. They came out of Egypt at the end of year 430. Okay, that's what's cool. But I will judge the nation that enslaves them. And then in the 4th generation, they will return here. And then it came about when the sun had set, it was very dark. And then, he put a deep sleep on Abram, my bad. And on that day, verse 18, the Lord made a covenant with Abram. For to your descendants I have given this land. From the river of Egypt as far as the great river, the river of Euphrates. This is like in chapter 12, he says he made a covenant with Abraham. In chapter 15, it says we cut the covenant. We made it official. We made it legally binding. But the cool part was it's unconditional because Abraham's asleep and God says, it's all on me. I'm the one that's going to make it happen. You don't have to do anything. So God makes a covenant. You're going to have all these descendants. Well, time's going by. Abram and Sarai are getting older, and Sarai thinks she needs to help God out. So she said, God said he'd make of you a great nation, so it's not happening. I'm getting older. Take my maid, and I'll have a child by her, and that can be the one. Well, that wasn't God's plan. He said, no. So chapter 16 is the story of Hagar and Ishmael, and I know a lot of you have already heard this story, but I feel sorry for Hagar. She didn't really have a choice. She's a maid and she's a foreign maid. They're Shemites, and she's an Egyptian. So she's a foreigner and she's a maid, and she doesn't have a choice in this situation. So she bears a child for Abram, but then she gets all hoity-toity because I'm pregnant and you're not, nanny boo-boo. And then because she acts all that, her mistress Sarai blames Abraham. It's all your fault. He said, she's your maid. Do what you want. So she treats her so bad she runs away. God finds her in the desert and says, Hagar, where are you going? I'm running away. She's mean. And he says, nope, go back. You need to live under her because the child you bear is from Abraham. I will make of him a great nation as well. And she says, oh, you are the God who sees. She gives God a name, El Roi. And then God names her child Ishmael. And that means God hears. God heard her cry. God heard his cries. So she goes back, lives with Sarai again. She has a child. Abram believes her. She was out in the desert with God talking to her. And yet Abram believes what she says. Names the child Ishmael, like she said. So he grows up. But we still don't have the child of promise. So let's move on. So, chapter 17. We have the sign of the covenant. Abram is now 99 years old, which means Sarai is 89. But God reminds him of his promise. And it says now, let me see. I missed one. In chapter 17, God changes their names. So I can say Abraham and Sarah now. Thank you. It's like, bleh. Now it's official. I can say it, and I missed that part. So in chapter 18, the Lord appears to Abraham again. He visits him. There's 3 men at the door, and he go bring them food, and Sarah's in the tent listening. And verse 9, they say to him, chapter 18, verse 9, where is Sarah, your wife? He says, she's in the tent. He says, I will surely return to you at this time next year, and behold, Sarah, your wife, will have a son. And Sarah was listening at the door. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. Sarah was past childbearing. And Sarah laughed to herself. After I become old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? And the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Saying, indeed, shall I bear a child when I'm so old? And here's the verse. And it can apply to Abraham and Sarah, or it can apply to me, or it can apply to anything going on in your life. Is anything, put it in all caps, is anything too difficult for the Lord? No. The answer is no. At the appointed time, I will return to you. At this time next year, Sarah will have a son. But no, I didn't laugh. I didn't. And he said, oh no, but you did. You did. I know. Okay, now fast forward to chapter 21. I told you, we are jumping. Verses 1 through 7. Then the Lord took note of Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. So Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the appointed time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Now Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born. Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh with me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. And I forgot about the part where God tells him the sign of the covenant is to get circumcised. And he circumcises himself and his 13-year-old son when he's 99 years old. And every male in his company, family members, servants born, servants bought, every male gets circumcised. And God says, do it. And then it says, on that very day, he did it. He made it happen. And he was 99 years old. It's like, whoa. Ow. Okay. We're at chapter 21 in Genesis. See, we got some chapters to go. Okay. Now, Isaac grows up. Well, first he's weaned. He's born, he's weaned, they're going to have a party for him. Sarah catches Ishmael making fun of him. She says, Abraham, he's got to go get that boy and his mom out of here. It makes Abraham sad because Ishmael's his child, but God says, no, do what she says because this is of me. Because Isaac is the child of promise. Ishmael is the child of the law. God says, I will take care of him. I will make a nation of him because I said you will be the father of nations. I will take care of him, but Isaac is the child of promise. So do as she says, send them away. Isaac grows up. Now we go to chapter 22. See, we're jumping. Isaac has grown up, and now God tests Abraham. This is where it gets so cool. Now it came about after these things, and that means a lot of years have passed, that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. And in your lesson, she makes a point of telling you there's a difference between testing and tempting. Satan tempted Eve in the garden. Like if you're on a diet and I show you my dark chocolate that I'm eating, it's like, hey, Brianna, I want some chocolate? It's like, I'm tempting you. God did not tempt Abraham. He tested him. But here's Abraham's response. Here I am. Whatever. And he says, now take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac. And right here is the first use of the word love in your Bible, and it's the love of a father for his son. Take your son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I will tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son, and he split wood for the burnt offering and rose and went to the place which God had told him. And I thought, immediately, his immediate obedience. He didn't sleep in and say, if I wake up later, this will take longer to happen. He didn't say, God, can we pray about this for about a month or 10 years? I love this boy. He's my only child. You said, anyway. Immediate obedience. He rose early in the morning, God said, do it, let's get on with it. And on the third day, he raised his eyes and saw the place from a distance. There's a note in your books that says, Abraham is obedient to a situation that doesn't make sense to him because he trusts God more than what he can see with his own eyes. It's like, to have that kind of trust. It's like, you're asking me to kill the only child I ever had, and yet he trusts God. That baffles me. It truly does. That much trust. I thought, I wish I had that much trust. It's like, he trusted God. So Abraham says to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and I and the lad will go over there, and we will worship, and we will return to you. He trusts God. So Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife, and the 2 of them walked on together. And Isaac spoke to Abraham his father and said, my father. Here I am, my son. See, there's another here I am. Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. So the 2 of them walked on together. Then they came to the place of which God had told him. And Abraham built the altar there, arranged the wood, and bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And you have to know, Isaac is not a small child. He's a grown man by now. He had to agree to this. He had to acquiesce. Say, okay, Dad, if this is what God has told you to do. Abraham, it's like he was born when he was 100. He might be 30 years old. So Abraham's 130 years old. His son is 30 plus maybe. His son could take him in a heartbeat. But it says he bound his son. So Isaac has to also be a person who is following God. To go along with this and say, okay, Father, if this is what God is telling you to do, okay. So it says, he bound his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. So he's right there. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, here I am. This is like the third time in this chapter. He said, do not stretch out your hand against the lad and do nothing to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Then Abraham raised his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the place of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide. This is the name of God, Jehovah Jireh, also a first time that's used in the Bible. As it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it will be provided. In two things. One is how Isaac typifies Jesus, in that he carried his own wood on his back, and Jesus carried his cross on his back. And they were in the Mount Moriah, the same mountain range that Abraham and Isaac walked up is the same mountain range that Jesus was crucified on. And he was in his early 30s. Jesus was on the cross in his early 30s. How he was Abraham's only begotten beloved son, and how God gave up his only begotten beloved son for a bunch of people who are going to go astray and turn their backs on him. Whew. But somebody asks, did Abraham really believe he was going to have to kill his son? Yeah, he did. But here's the kicker. Also back in Hebrews 11, verses 17 through 19, it says, by faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, whom he had received, and he who had received the promises was offering up his only begotten son. And it was he to whom it was said, in Isaac your descendants shall be called. And verse 19 is the best. And he considered that God is able to raise people even from the dead, from which he also received him back as a type. Booyah! It's like, yes, yes. He had faith. He trusted God. He said, even if God tells me to kill him, God says this is where my descendants are coming from. God will bring him back to life. And in a sense he did, because Abraham was willing, and he said, I can see that you're willing, so you don't have to do it. It's like, God will provide. And he did. It's like, yes, yes, and yes. Whew. Okay. At the beginning of chapter 23 of Genesis, it tells about the death of Sarah, and that Abraham buys a cave from the people he's living with to be a burial place for her, and then later on the rest of his family. So now we go to 24, and Abraham was old. I mean really old by now, because Sarah lived to be 127. He was 10 years older than her, and now Isaac is grown up, so he's like in the range of 175 maybe. He's up there. He was old and advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed him in every way. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, place your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I live, but you will go to my country and my relatives and take a wife for my son Isaac. And so that's a whole big story, which we're not getting into. He wanted Isaac to have the wife from his family. So this is a cool story. Go back and read it on your own, but we're going to skip it. So you know, he got a wife, and it was God's wife that he had chose. And verse 67 of chapter 24 says, and it's Rebekah, because it was Laban's sister. Abraham sends his servant back to his family where he came from to get a wife for his son. So God picked out Rebekah and confirmed that to the servant. So the servant brings Rebekah back to where Isaac lives. And then Isaac, in verse 67, it says, Then Isaac brought her, Rebekah, into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. And then you go to 25, 21, they get married. Oh, Abraham died at 175, I'm sorry. So he was a little less than that when he got a wife. But Isaac and Rebekah get married, he loves her, and then she is barren for a while, and he prays for her, and then she gets pregnant, she's going to have twins. Yay. So, she conceived in chapter 25, verse 22, but the children struggled within her. And she said, oh, why is it this way? It's like, my daughter had one large child in her, and she said, it feels like he's an alien on a unicycle driving around all day. And imagine having two of those. So she says, And she asked the Lord, why is it like this? And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples will be separated from your body. And one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. This is a word from the Lord. She should have just paid attention right then and there and let it go. But no. See, like Sarah tried to help God out, Rebekah tried to help God out too. And it doesn't go well when God tells us stuff and then we try to help him. So, So, when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out, red, all over like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau. Afterwards, his brother came forth with his hand holding onto Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob, which means heel grabber or deceiver. And Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them. Whoa. Okay, so Esau likes to hunt, and he's the manly hunter guy. So he's daddy's favorite. And Jacob is not. Jacob's more clean-shaven and a homebody, so he's mommy's favorite. That's also a bad thing. That's really bad. I know this from personal experience. But one day Esau's out hunting, and he comes back and he's famished because he didn't get anything. And lo and behold, Jacob's stirring up a pot of stew. And Esau's like, hey, give me some of your stew. I'm starving. I didn't get anything today. He says, okay, for a price. Sell me your birthright. See, Esau's the oldest child. He, as the oldest child, has a right to the birthright that says the first child gets twice what everybody else get, and the first child gets, charge of the family business and the major portion of everything, and all. He gets to be the boss. But Esau, it says Esau despised his birthright in verse 34. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and went on his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. It's like he was thinking more of his immediate hunger than his future. And it was on Jacob, but it was also, he could have said no, but he didn't. So, skip another chapter. We're going to 27. And this is where now, time after these things, Isaac is getting old, and he wants Esau to go make him a good meal so I can give you the blessing. There's the birthright, and then there's the blessing. And it's not just a blessing, it's the blessing. So he says, Esau, go hunt, get some game, make me a good meal like you do, and I'm going to give you the blessing. But mommy's snooping. She's got her ear to the tent wall, and she hears him telling this. And she wants that blessing to go to Jacob. But is she forgetting that God already told her the older will serve the younger? Let it play out. But she thinks she's got to make sure it happens. So then, verse 5, Rebekah was listening while Jacob spoke to his son Esau. And Rebekah says to Jacob, bring me some game and prepare a savory dish for me that I may... She heard him saying that. She tells Jacob, go to the flock, get a lamb or goat, whatever, and I'm going to make it taste like Esau would taste it, and you're going to take it in so your dad can give you that blessing. He said, excuse me, I don't sound like my brother. I don't look like my brother. He's hairy. I'm not. She says, it'll be on me. She said, you should bring it to your father that he may eat it, so that he may bless you before his death. And he answered his mother and said, behold, Esau, my brother, is a hairy man, and I'm a smooth man. He'll feel me, I'll be a deceiver to him, and then I will bring upon myself a curse and not a blessing. But she talks him into it. He does it. She makes the meal. She wraps goat skin around his arm. He goes in and lies to his dad, says he's Esau, and Isaac gives him the blessing. And wow, it's a big one too. May God give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth, and abundance of grain and new wine. And may you be master of your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be. And the blessing is barely out of Isaac's mouth, and Jacob is barely out of the tent when Esau comes home. Father, I've made you my meal, bless me. Who are you? Esau, your son, remember? He says, oh no. Your brother was just here and he tricked me and I gave him the blessing. She says, but Dad, don't you have any blessing for me? Come on, is there only one? He said, that was the blessing. I can give you a blessing, but ultimately you're going to serve your brother because it's already happened. So now Esau's really mad, and he's already plotting. As soon as my dad dies, I'm killing my brother. I'm just going to kill him. He's not going to do this to me. So, Rebecca knows this. She also hears Esau saying this. I heard Esau saying he's going to kill you as soon as your dad dies, so get out of Dodge, buddy. Verse 42, 43. Now when the words of her elder son Esau were reported to Rebekah, she sent and called her younger son Jacob and said to him, behold, your brother Esau is consoling himself concerning you by planning to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice, arise and flee to Haran to my brother Laban. So she's telling him to get out of Dodge. And then she goes to her husband and says, I just don't like these Canaanite women. I don't want Jacob to marry one of them. Let's send him to my brother. Making it sound like, she wasn't just trying him to get. Anyway, so Jacob's fleeing from his brother to go to his mother's brothers. So he flees. And in chapter 28, verse 10, he departs from Beersheba and went to Haran. And he came to a certain place and spent the night there. Because the sun had set, he spent the night there because the sun had set. And he took one of the stones of the place and put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he had a dream. And God speaks to him. See, God makes his covenant known to each of Abraham's descendants. God said, Abraham, this is an everlasting covenant. I'm going to bless you and your descendants. And then he says the same thing to Isaac. Isaac, I'm reaffirming the covenant I made with your dad, Abraham, and to your descendants. And he's going to repeat the same covenant to Jacob. Jacob, I'm making a covenant with you and with all your descendants. He says, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will also be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and the north and the south. And in you and in your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Because from them will come the Messiah. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I had promised to you. God reaffirmed his covenant with Jacob, but Jacob's still on his way to Haran. So he gets there. Jacob, verse in chapter 29, Jacob went to his journey and came to the land of the son of the east, and he looked and saw, well, he's in the country where his uncle Laban lives. And he sees all these shepherds. Hey, have you heard of this guy named Laban? Oh, yeah, he lives right around here. In fact, here comes his daughter, Rachel, because she's one of the shepherdesses. And it's love at first sight. Jacob sees Rachel, and it's like, oh. She's beautiful of face and form, so, I get it. So he falls in love. she runs home to tell Dad, hey, we got a relative here. She said, bring him on. And first he's visiting, and then he's working for him. And Laban says to Jacob, because you're my relative, should you therefore work for me for nothing? Tell me, what should your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak. Looking at myself. But Rachel was beautiful of form and face. Now Jacob loved Rachel so. He said, I'll serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. And it seemed to him as if it was but days, because he was so in love. And he worked for his uncle for 7 years. He says, okay, I've worked my 7 years, and I'd like my wife now. And so Laban says, okay, let's make a party, and we'll have a festival tonight, and I'll give you your wife. Well, by the time the party's over and it's time to go to bed, it's dark. They live in a tent, and the women are heavily veiled. Well, okay, part of Jacob's name means he's the deceiver, and now he's going to get deceived because his uncle sends Leah to his tent and not Rachel, and he doesn't realize it until the next morning. And he wakes up, what? You are not the girl. So he goes, has a one-on-one, what are you doing to me? Well, it's just not our custom around here to marry off the younger daughter first. So if you live with Leah for this week, give her her wedding week, and then I'll give you Rachel too, if you work another 7 years. And because he's still so in love with Rachel, he says, okay, fine. But now he's got 2 wives. This never is good. This never is good, especially when they're sisters. Yeah. So now he has Leah and he has Rachel, but he obviously loves Rachel way more. And in verse 31, it says, now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb. Now Leah has something that Rachel doesn't, because Rachel is barren. And Leah has four little boys right off the bat. She has Reuben. See, I have a son. Maybe my husband will like me now. Then she has Simeon. God heard my cries. Then she has Levi, which means he'll feel attached to me. I've given him 3 boys. And by 4th boy, Judah, I will just praise God for what I have. And for all intents and purposes, I believe that Leah was a good mom and a godly mom. She has 4 boys. Well then, And just side note, Jesus comes from the line of Judah, just in case you didn't already know it. Now, this is really getting to Rachel. So, she's going to be like Sarah. Well, I'll give you my maid, you sleep with her, and then it will be considered my child. So now Jacob sleeps with Rachel's maid and has 2 children by her. By Bilhah, he has Dan and Naphtali. And then Leah realizes she's not conceiving lately, so she's going to pull the same, 2 can play this game. So she gives Jacob her maid, Zilpah. And Zilpah has Issachar and Zebulun. So Leah's had 4, and now Rachel's maid has had 2, and now Leah's maid has 2 more. So we have 8 boys so far. And then finally, in verse 22 of chapter 30, it says, then God remembered Rachel, and God gave heed to her and opened her womb. And Rachel has Joseph. So now, there's 11 boys. Let's go to verse 25. Now Rachel said Joseph, remember, Rachel is beloved, and Joseph is the only child that shares the 2 of them, so it's not a great surprise to anybody that Joseph is his favorite. But now Jacob is ready to leave Laban and move on with his life. He's not really getting treated fairly with the wage thing, and so in verse 25 it says, now it came about when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said to Laban, send me away that I may go to my own place and my own country. Jacob tries to get him to stay, I'll give you this and that. They make a new agreement, and Laban fudges on that, and then Jacob does some other stuff he probably shouldn't have done. So we're going to jump to 32. They get out of Dodge, but it ends up he's kind of running away from Laban. So Jacob's running away. He has his 2 wives, 2 concubines, 11 children, and all his flocks, and he's wealthy with flocks. So he's went his way, but the angels of God met him on the way. He sends messengers ahead. And I don't think she mentions this in the lesson. It's like in the lesson I felt like he thought he was going to get surprised by Esau, but he wasn't. He had sent messengers ahead. But then when the messengers come back, they said, he's coming to you and he's bringing 400 people with him, 400 men. And then that's when he gets scared. He says, uh-oh, when I left him, he wanted to kill me, so this might not work out well. So he sends messengers ahead of him with, let's give him what? A bunch of sheep, a bunch of goats, some donkeys, some camel. He sends he's sending gifts ahead to appease his brother, so you don't want to kill me. And then it says he sends his wives and children across the river, and for this one period of time, one night, he is alone in the camp. So the present passed on before him. That's all the flocks. And I'm on verse 21 of chapter 32. While he himself spent that night in the camp. Now he arose that same night and took his 2 wives and his 2 maids and his 11 children, crossed the river. 24. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. And it ends up he's wrestling with God. And he says, let me go. I won't let you go till you bless me. What's your name? And he has to tell God his name. He says, I have to admit who I am. Jacob, I'm the heel grabber. I'm the deceiver. And that's when God changes his name and says, not anymore. You're going to be Israel. Israel means strives with God, or God strives with you. But it's like, verse 28, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. You are no longer that person you were. Say, that's who you were. That's not who you are. 2 Corinthians 5:17. Oh, so good. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things have become new. You are a new person, Jacob. You are not the heel grabber anymore. You are Israel. That is your name. And then he has a new name, but now he's limping, but it's a reminder of my new name. He meets Esau. Esau doesn't want to kill him. He hugs, he kisses, they're great. It's been years. He got over it, okay? And so they go, Esau wants him to go with him. He says, no, God wants him to come to Bethel. And so he heads on to Bethel, and we're going to go to chapter 35. And they go to Bethel, then they are on their way between Bethel and what's going to be Bethlehem. Let me see. He tells them to go to Bethel, arise and go to Bethel. Verse 16 of chapter 35. Then they journeyed from Bethel, and when there was still some distance to go to Ephrath, I think, Rachel began to give birth, and she suffered severe labor. She's having another little guy. She's in severe labor. Do not fear, you've had another son. But it came about as her soul was departing, for she died, that she named him Ben-Oni, but his father called him Benjamin. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. So now Jacob has 12 sons. And these are where the 12 tribes come from. But some people don't realize that it's not always the same names as you think of. It's not just this list of names, Joseph and Benjamin. Because when they get set up in the land, Levi doesn't have an inheritance, because the Levites have cities in they're divided amongst all the tribes. And Joseph, not because he's discounted, because he's double counted, gets double portion. So if you minus Levi and Joseph, but you add in Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, you still have 12 tribes. Because Ephraim and Manasseh are Joseph's sons, and the Levites had cities throughout everybody else's. So Jacob still has 12 sons. The kingdom of Israel has 12 tribes. Okay, skipping to chapter 37. Now, remember, Joseph is the only child that Jacob and Rachel shared, so he's definitely the favored child. And you know how the other children feel when there's a favored child? Oh my goodness. So, and he's also the youngest, next to youngest. And his dad makes him the robe of many colors, and he proudly wears it in front of his brothers. That does not go over well. So, Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons. He was the son of his old age, and he made him a very-colored tunic. And Joseph had a dream. He tells his brother, I had this dream, and you all bowed down to me. And then had all the sheaves, and then he tells him sun, moon, and stars. You know, if I knew my brothers didn't like me super much, I probably wouldn't tell them these dreams. You know, tell your dad, but maybe keep that to yourself. And it says, ooh, ah, ooh, ooh. And so his brothers said to him in verse 8, are you actually going to reign over us? Are you really going to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Apparently, at this point in his life, he wasn't super humble. So he has the other dream. This time his dad keeps it in the back of his mind. Okay, so time goes by. They go to pasture your sheep. Dad says to Joseph, go check on them. He puts on his cool robe to go check on his brothers so he can make a report back to Dad, because he might be a tattletale. I don't know at this point in his life. Anyway, he's going to check. His dad wants a report. They see him coming. We don't like him. Let's get rid of him. First, they're going to kill him. Why kill him when we can make money on him? Throw him in a pit. Sell him to the Ishmaelite traders. Where does that name sound familiar from? Who take him to Egypt. Then they dip his robe in blood and try to tell his dad a wild beast got him. Dad's in mourning forever. Nobody can console him. Now, 39, Joseph is a slave in Egypt. And I have some of my own thoughts here. Because the Lord was with him in Egypt. And when it says he had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. And I'm sorry, I'm really running out of time, and I know that. I'm sorry about this today. Short, small groups are going to be short. I can't stop here. I'm sorry, I just can't do it. So the Lord was with Joseph. He became a successful man. His master saw that the Lord was with him. Joseph found favor in his sight, became his personal servant. The Lord blessed somewhere between the 17-year-old, maybe a bit prideful, and being a slave in Egypt, I think Joseph had a mindset change. Because he was a servant. He was a slave. He might have started out in shackles. And he's working in somebody's house, and they might speak a different language. How does he become such a successful house manager? He has to learn a new culture, a new language, adapt to a new environment, and he does it. And it's like, I don't know if he was walking all the way to Egypt or if he was thrown over a donkey or a camel and had a lot of thinking time between thrown in a pit, brothers hating him, to arriving and being sold as a slave when you were the favored son and now you were sold as a slave. That could wreck some people. But apparently, he had a talk with Jesus. God spoke to him. Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal servant. It came about from the time he made him overseer in his house and over all that he owned. The Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. The Lord's blessing was on all that he owned in the house and the field. Well, and then he tells you he's handsome. And then Potiphar's wife wants him to sleep with her, and he says no. Because he says no, she lies and says he did. And he gets thrown in jail. And guess what? The Lord was with him in jail, extended kindness to him, and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. The chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it to prosper. Then the king gets mad at two of his cupbearer and his baker. Throws them in jail. They have dreams. And Joseph tells them what their dreams mean. And their dreams come true. One gets his job back. The other gets killed. Crucified on a pole. Yeah. But the cupbearer gets put back in the king's service. And Joseph says, remember me because I didn't do anything to get put here. He forgets, of course, for 2 years until Pharaoh has dreams. And he dreams about the cows, fat cows getting eaten by skinny cows and still remaining skinny. And the 7 grains of, there's healthy grains of wheat get eaten by scrawny grains of wheat. And he says, hey, and that's when the cupbearer remembers, oh, there was this guy in jail, and he told me what my dream meant came true. You might want to go talk to him. So he does, brings him out, cleaned him up, put him before Pharaoh. Pharaoh tells him his dream. He tells him what the dream means. God has told you what's going to happen. You're going to have 7 years of plenty, and then there's going to be 7 years of famine, and you need to be organized in your country. You're like, right now, here's what you need to do. He says, well, if you already know what we need to do, you're the man in charge. So now Joseph is in charge, second in charge of the country of Egypt. The famine just isn't in Egypt. The famine spreads to where Jacob's brothers live. And they hear that there's food in Egypt. So Jacob says, hey boys, I heard, through the grapevine, on Facebook, whatever, there's food in Egypt. So how about you guys go to Egypt and get us some food? Well, because he's an Egyptian now. You don't know. Everybody has to come to him because he's in charge. Chapter 42. Whew. Now Joseph was the ruler over the land, and he was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. Yes. And he recognizes them. They don't recognize him. So he gives them a hard time, tells them they're spies, puts them in jail for 3 days, and then says, okay, one of you is going to stay here, the rest of you can go home, because he interrogated him, found out their dad's still living and they have a younger brother. I'm not going to talk to you again unless you bring your little brother with you. It's like, what does he care about a little brother? So they go home, take their grain. Oh, he has his servant put their money back in their bag, and they're, oh no, what are we going to do? So they go home and tell Jacob all this weird stuff that happens. Money was back in our bag. He knows we have a younger brother. He kept Simeon in jail, and if we want grain again, we've got to take Benjamin with us. No. I've lost Joseph, and Simeon's in jail, and you're not going to take Benjamin away from me. You can't go. And let me see. Reuben talks to him. Finally, Judah gets through to him and says, Dad, my life for his. And so you can see the shift in their attitudes. Where they hated Joseph, they're now being protective of Benjamin. They saw the grief their dad was in. We can't. And they told Joseph, his life is bound up in the life of that boy. But Judah says, Dad, you're going to have to trust me with him because we'll all starve to death. So Jacob finally agrees. They take Benjamin with him. They go back to see Joseph, and he recognizes them and his brother, and he tells his servant, take them to my house. We'll have lunch there. He seats them all in order by age. He gives Benjamin 5 times as much as he gives anybody else. And then he sends them on their way, and he puts all their money back in the bags and his silver cup, and then he sends his servant after him and say, what do you think you're doing? Stealing from my master? Whoever's got it, I'm going to kill him or he can be my slave. And they realize it was in Benjamin's bag. He can't lose Benjamin. So they all go back, and he reveals himself to them. He sends everybody out of the house. It's me, Joseph, your brother. Okay, see, I didn't even look. He tests them. Their attitudes have definitely changed. And he speaks kindly to them. Let me see. Chapter 45, start at the end of verse 4. I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. But in verse 5, he says, do not be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me here before you to preserve life. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant in the earth and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. It was not you who sent me here, but God. And if Joseph hadn't been sent as a slave to Egypt, they would have already died. There wouldn't be any Israel. There wouldn't be a Messiah. He says, God sent me here. So he gets some supplies. He sends them back home to get his dad. He sent his brothers away, verse 24. And as they departed, he said, don't quarrel on your journey. Sends them home. They go back to get dad and bring him back. They're settling in, chapter 47. And Joseph brought his father, Jacob, and presented him to Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And I think in your book it says Pharaoh just blessed Jacob. It might be just a typo, because twice in my Bible it says, Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And verse 10, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh and then went out from his presence. They're united. Joseph got to see his dad got to see his son, whom he thought was dead for years, and be reunited with him. And they get settled in the land of Goshen in Egypt. Jacob dies there, but his dying wish is that, it says, Jacob lived in the land of Egypt for 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. When the time came for Israel to when the time for Israel to die drew near, he called his son Joseph and said to him, please do not bury me in Egypt. But when I die, I want to lie down with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place, the one that Abraham bought for Sarah. Because Egypt's not his home. Canaan is his home. And they did. And they then go to all his brothers, and a whole bunch of Egyptian officials went, and they do a great funeral and buried Jacob where he wanted to be buried. Chapter 50, verse 15. The story ends with Joseph's death, but it's so cool. Well, first of all, after Jacob's died, they're afraid again. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, oh, what if Joseph bears a grudge and pays us back for all the wrong we did to him? Joseph says to them in verse 19, do not be afraid, for am I in God's place? You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result to preserve many people alive. So therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. So he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. And then it ends with Joseph dying. And so Joseph died at the age of 110, and he was embalmed and placed in a coffin. He was not buried. He was in a coffin. Go to Hebrews 11, verse 22. I love Hebrews 11. Oh my goodness. By faith, Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the exodus of the sons of Israel and gave orders concerning his bones. He's just getting his family settled there. What would make him think that they're going to have to leave unless God showed that to him? Made mention of the exodus of the sons of Israel and gave orders concerning his bones. Take my bones with you, because this is not my home either. But the really cool part was this morning in the one-year Bible, we are reading in Exodus. And in Exodus chapter 13, verse 19, it says, and Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, saying, God will surely take care of you, and you shall carry my bones from here when you go. Because this wasn't where he was supposed to be. It's like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. The line of the Messiah comes through Judah. But the line had to be preserved, so Joseph had to go to Egypt to keep his whole family alive. But he says, this is not our home. God promises thus the land of Canaan. Jacob was buried back in Canaan. Joseph was too. I'm sorry, I know that was way long, but she had just expected me to cover a lot of territory, and that's the fastest way I knew to do it. So, okay, tiny short break. Go potty if you need to. Get a break. No, never mind. No break yet. Let's watch the video. Then we can have a break. I'm losing my mind. It's going too fast. Thank you.
So last week we talked about becoming the bride of Christ, and we studied this amazing symbolism that happens when we become part